Aaron Miles never expected that a simple Sunday berry-picking trip would turn into a fight for survival. When his daughter pointed to an abandoned car deep in the Oregon wilderness, he thought it was just another piece of forgotten junk. But the muffled sound coming from the trunk changed everything. Inside was a woman, barely alive, terror in her eyes, whispering a warning that would shatter his quiet life forever. What happened next would test every ounce of courage he had left. If you're watching this story unfold, drop a comment below with your city or country. I want to see how far this incredible tale reaches across the globe. And please, stay until the end. You won't believe where this goes. The morning of October 13th started like any other Sunday in the Miles household, which is to say, it started with negotiation. "Dad, I need to bring Mr. Whiskers," Lily insisted, clutching her stuffed rabbit against her chest with the determination of a union leader facing down management. Aaron Miles looked at his 9-year-old daughter across the breakfast table, her auburn hair still tangled from sleep, her green eyes, so much like her mother's, fixed on him with absolute certainty. He'd seen that look before. It was the same expression Sarah had worn when she told him she was pregnant, that she wanted to keep the baby, that everything would work out somehow. Sarah had been gone for 3 years now. Cancer didn't negotiate. "Lilybug," Aaron said, running a hand through his own dark hair, streaked prematurely with gray at 34. "We're going berry picking, not to the Tea Party convention. Mr. Whiskers is going to get dirty." "Mr. Whiskers likes adventure," Lily countered, setting the rabbit on the table between them like evidence in a trial. "Remember when we went to the beach and he got sandy? He didn't complain once." Aaron felt the familiar tug at the corner of his mouth, the one that happened whenever his daughter deployed her particular brand of ironclad logic. She was smart. Too smart sometimes. The kind of smart that made parent-teacher conferences both proud and terrifying. "Fine," he relented, holding up his hands in surrender. "But you're responsible for keeping him clean. Deal?" "Deal!" Lily's face exploded into a grin, and she grabbed Mr. Whiskers, already racing toward her bedroom to pack her small backpack with the essentials. A juice box, her favorite granola bars, and apparently, one well-loved stuffed rabbit. Aaron stood up and began clearing the breakfast dishes. Scrambled eggs, slightly burnt toast, the kind of meal that screamed single dad doing his best. Through the kitchen window, he could see their small 2-story house on the outskirts of Pine Haven, Oregon, population 4,200. Beyond the weathered fence of their backyard, the forest began, miles and miles of Douglas fir, western hemlock, and silence. He loved that silence. After Sarah died, after the funeral casseroles stopped coming, after the sympathetic looks from neighbors faded into the background noise of small-town life, that silence had been his refuge. Some people found it oppressive, that weight of wilderness pressing in on all sides. Aaron found it honest. The forest didn't pretend. It didn't offer false comfort. It simply existed, ancient and indifferent, and somehow that made it easier to breathe. His phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Tom, his buddy from the lumber mill where Aaron worked as a safety inspector. Rangers found another abandoned vehicle off Highway 20. Third one this month. Weird shit, man. Aaron frowned, typing back. Dumpers? Maybe. But these cars aren't stripped. They're just left. Doors open, keys still inside sometimes, like people just walked away. Creepy. We still on for poker Friday? Unless you're scared of losing another $20. Aaron smiled and pocketed the phone. Tom had a gift for making everything sound like an action movie. 3 abandoned cars probably meant nothing more than tourists with bad judgment or locals dodging repo men. This was Oregon, not an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. "I'm ready," Lily announced, appearing in the doorway with her backpack strapped on, Mr. Whiskers tucked safely in the front pocket, his fuzzy head poking out like a tiny co-pilot. "Let me see," Aaron said, crouching down to check her gear. "Water bottle?" "Check." "Jacket, in case it gets cold?" "Check." "Your sense of adventure?" Lily giggled. "Double check." "Then let's hit the road, Captain." They climbed into Aaron's truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 that had seen better decades, but still ran like a dream if you didn't mind the occasional grinding noise in the passenger door that required a specific jiggle and pull technique to open. Lily had mastered the technique by age 7. The drive to the old logging trail took 20 minutes, winding through town and then onto progressively smaller roads until pavement gave way to gravel and gravel gave way to dirt. Aaron had been coming to this spot since he was a kid himself, back when his father would take him hunting. The berries grew wild here, blackberries, huckleberries, salmonberries, depending on the season. Today, they were after blackberries. Lily loved them, and Aaron had promised to help her make jam, a domestic adventure that would likely end with purple stains on every kitchen surface. "Dad, can we listen to the pirate song?" Lily asked as they bounced along the rutted trail. "Again, we've heard it 17 times this week." 18 times, Lily corrected. "And it's a good song." Aaron reached over and tousled her hair. "Your wish is my command, Bug." The opening notes of some pop song about sailing and treasure filled the truck cab, and Lily immediately began singing along, her voice high and slightly off-key, but filled with the kind of joy that made Aaron's chest ache. These were the moments he held on to, the simple, perfect, ordinary moments that proved life could still be good, even after it had been so thoroughly bad. They reached the trailhead at 9:30. The sun was already climbing higher, burning off the morning mist that clung to the trees. Aaron killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the silence rush back in. No cars, no people, just birdsong and the whisper of wind through pine needles. "You ready, explorer?" he asked, turning to Lily. She nodded eagerly, already unbuckling her seatbelt with practiced ease. They grabbed their supplies, a large plastic bucket for berries, a smaller container for Lily, leather work gloves to protect against thorns, and the bear spray Aaron always carried, though they'd never seen a bear on these trips. Better safe than sorry was basically the single dad motto. The trail was overgrown but still navigable, winding deeper into the forest where the logging company had worked decades ago before environmental regulations and declining profits shuttered the operation. Now nature was slowly reclaiming it all, moss creeping up abandoned equipment, trees growing through the rusted remains of a forgotten bulldozer, the forest patiently swallowing every human intrusion. "Stay close," Aaron reminded Lily as they walked, "and watch out for thorns, roots, and anything that looks like poison ivy," Lily recited. "I know, Dad. You tell me every time." "That's because every time those things are still out here waiting to get you." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, following the old logging road as it curved and climbed. The berry bushes grew thick here, laden with fruit. Aaron showed Lily which berries were ripe, the ones so dark they were almost black that came away from the vine with barely a touch. The purple juice stained their fingers within minutes. "How many do you think we need for jam?" Lily asked, dropping a handful into her container with a satisfying plink, plink, plink. "Well," Aaron said, pretending to calculate, "if we assume each jar needs about 4 cups of berries, and we want to make, say, 6 jars, that's a lot of berries, Bug. You might be picking till Christmas." Lily laughed. "That's okay. I like it here. It's peaceful." Aaron felt that familiar ache again, pride and sadness twisted together. She was too wise for 9 years old, his daughter. She'd had to grow up too fast, watching her mother waste away, learning to be strong when she should have been learning to ride a bike without training wheels. But she'd survived. They both had. And now, here in the forest with purple-stained fingers and a stuffed rabbit keeping watch, they were finding something like happiness again. They'd been picking for about 40 minutes when Lily suddenly straightened up, her head tilted like a dog hearing something humans couldn't. "Dad?" she said quietly. "Yeah, Bug?" "There's a car over there." Aaron looked up, following her pointing finger. At first, he didn't see anything, just trees and underbrush and the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. Then his eyes adjusted, and he saw it. About 30 yards off the trail, half hidden behind a thick tangle of salal and Oregon grape, was the rear end of a vehicle. Gray, or maybe silver, it was hard to tell under the coating of dust and forest debris. One taillight was shattered, the other was intact, but dark. "Huh," Aaron said, setting down his bucket. "Probably just someone who broke down and abandoned it." But even as he said the words, something felt off. The car wasn't just off the trail, it was deliberately hidden, backed into the brush like someone had wanted to make it disappear. And the logging road they were on was gated at the main highway, marked with no unauthorized access signs. You had to really want to get back here. Can we look at it? Lily asked, her voice pitched with curiosity. Aaron's first instinct was to say no, to steer his daughter away from the abandoned vehicle and continue their innocent berry-picking trip. But something pulled at him. Maybe it was the text from Tom that morning, or maybe it was the way the sunlight seemed to avoid that particular patch of forest, leaving the car in shadow even though it should have been lit up. Stay right next to me, he said firmly. And if I tell you to go back to the trail, you go. Understand? I understand, Lily said, slipping her small hand into his. They approached carefully, pushing through the brush. Up close, Aaron could see it was a sedan, a Honda Accord, maybe 10 years old, gray with a significant dent in the rear quarter panel. The back window was shattered, glass fragments scattered across the trunk and forest floor. The driver's side door hung open, revealing an interior that looked like a storm had torn through it. Seat cushions slashed, stuffing pulled out, the glove compartment hanging open and empty. Someone was looking for something, Aaron murmured, more to himself than to Lily. The smell hit him then, faint but distinct. Gasoline mixed with something else, something organic and unpleasant. His mind immediately went to worst-case scenarios, the kind of things you heard about on true crime podcasts. Bodies left in abandoned cars, drug deals gone bad. The kind of darkness that wasn't supposed to touch places like Pinehaven. "Dad, look," Lily whispered, pointing to the ground near the rear wheel. Deep tire tracks carved into the mud, leading away from the car before disappearing into harder ground. But that wasn't what made Aaron's stomach clench. It was the pattern of the tracks, the way they fishtailed, like the car had been moving fast, erratically, and near the rear bumper, something that looked disturbingly like a handprint in the dirt, the fingers spread wide as if someone had been dragging themselves. "Lily, I want you to go wait by our berry buckets," Aaron said, keeping his voice level, calm. "Right now, okay? But now, Bug, please." Something in his tone must have gotten through because Lily nodded and carefully picked her way back toward the trail. Aaron waited until she was out of sight before he approached the trunk of the sedan. The air felt heavy suddenly, pressing down on his shoulders. The forest had gone quiet. No birdsong, no wind, just a suffocating silence that made his ears ring. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to grab his daughter and get back to the truck, to pretend he'd never seen this car. But he couldn't, because if someone was hurt, if someone needed help. Aaron reached out and tried the trunk release. Nothing, locked or jammed. He moved around to the driver's side, carefully avoiding the broken glass, and popped the interior trunk release. He heard the mechanism click. The trunk lid lifted slightly, just an inch or two, blocked by the frame being bent from the impact. Aaron walked back around, his work boots crunching on broken glass, and gripped the edge of the trunk with both hands. He pulled. The hinges squealed, a sound like an animal in pain, and the trunk opened fully, revealing the dark interior. For a moment, Aaron couldn't process what he was seeing. His brain tried to make sense of the shapes, the shadows, a hand, a pale human hand lying limp against a stained blanket. Aaron's heart stopped, then restarted at triple speed. His hands were shaking as he yanked the blanket back, revealing the curled form of a woman. She was alive. Barely, but alive. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular breaths. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, dried blood caking her hairline. Her wrists were bound with zip ties, the plastic cutting into the skin so deeply it had left raw, oozing wounds. A strip of duct tape covered her mouth. "Jesus," Aaron breathed, the word coming out as pure prayer. The woman's one good eye opened slightly, unfocused, rolling before finally landing on Aaron's face. Behind the tape, she made a sound, a muffled moan of terror or relief. He couldn't tell which. "It's okay," Aaron said, though his voice was shaking. "You're okay. I'm going to help you." He reached down with trembling hands and carefully, gently, peeled back the duct tape from her mouth. The woman gasped, her cracked lips working for a moment before words came out, hoarse, barely audible, soaked in fear. "Please, don't let them find me." Aaron felt ice flood his veins. "Don't let who find you?" But before the woman could answer, a sound cut through the forest silence, the sharp crack of a breaking branch, Close, too close. Aaron's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the tree line. Everything looked the same, just trees and shadow and undergrowth. But the birds were still silent. The air still felt wrong. They weren't alone. "Lily!" Aaron called out, his voice urgent but controlled. "Stay where you are! Don't move!" He looked back down at the woman in the trunk. "Can you walk?" She tried to nod, but the movement made her wince in pain. Aaron didn't have time for gentle. He reached in, got his arms under her shoulders and knees, and lifted. She weighed almost nothing, her body frighteningly light. As he pulled her from the trunk, he saw more injuries, bruises covering her arms, what looked like cigarette burns on her shoulders, and something carved into her forearm, though he couldn't make out the design. Someone had tortured her. Aaron's jaw clenched as rage mixed with his fear. He carried her toward the trail, moving as quickly as he dared, every sense heightened, listening for sounds of pursuit. The woman's head lolled against his chest, and she whispered something he couldn't quite catch. "What?" he asked, still moving. "They know," she breathed. "Your name, Miles." Aaron's blood turned to ice water. She knew his name. This broken, tortured woman knew his name. "How do you—" he started, but another sound cut him off. An engine, distant but growing closer, coming up the logging road toward them. "No, no, no, no!" Aaron burst back onto the trail where Lily was waiting, her eyes going wide when she saw the woman in his arms. "Dad, what—" "We're leaving, right now. Move!" He shifted the woman's weight, half carrying, half dragging her, as Lily grabbed their buckets and ran ahead. The truck was parked 200 yards up the trail, around two bends. The engine sound was getting louder. They had maybe a minute, maybe less. Lily reached the truck first and yanked open the passenger door using her practiced technique. Aaron all but threw the woman into the back seat, her body sprawling across the bench, still bound at the wrists. "Get in and stay down," he ordered, slamming the door and sprinting around to the driver's side. Lily was already climbing into the passenger seat, Mr. Whiskers clutched to her chest, her face pale. Aaron jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice. Come on, and roared to life. Through the windshield, Aaron could see dust rising from around the bend ahead. The other vehicle was close now, so close he could hear the rumble of a big engine, something with serious power. "Hold on," he said, and threw the truck into reverse. The F-150 shot backward down the logging trail. Aaron's arm draped over the seat, his head turned to see where he was going. The truck bounced violently over ruts and rocks. In the back seat, the woman groaned in pain. Lily had her eyes squeezed shut. The other vehicle came around the bend, a black SUV with tinted windows, moving fast, too fast for the terrain. For one frozen moment, Aaron made eye contact with the driver. Just a glimpse. A broad face, sunglasses, the flash of something metal in his hand. Then Aaron cranked the wheel, using a wider section of the trail to execute a shaky three-point turn that made the truck's suspension scream in protest. The instant he had the nose pointed downhill, he floored it. The truck lurched forward, gaining speed, the engine howling. The SUV was behind them now, close enough that Aaron could see it in his rearview mirror, close enough to see the passenger window rolling down, close enough to see the arm extending. "Get down!" Aaron roared. The back windshield exploded in a shower of safety glass. Lily screamed. Aaron kept his foot on the gas, the truck careening down the trail at speeds that would have been suicidal in any other circumstance. Trees flashed past on either side. The truck caught air over a rise and slammed back down with a bone-jarring crunch. Another shot. This one went wide, kicking up dirt from the trail ahead. "Dad!" Lily was crying now, curled into the smallest ball she could make in the passenger seat. Aaron's mind was racing. The gated entrance to the logging road was still a mile ahead. Once they reached it, they'd have to stop to open the gate, or ram through it and risk disabling the truck. Either way, they'd be sitting ducks. Unless there was another trail, an older one, barely more than a deer path, that branched off about a quarter-mile ahead. His father had shown it to him years ago. It was rough, maybe too rough for the truck, but it led to a different forest road that would take them out on the opposite side of the mountain. If he could reach it, if the truck could handle it, If the SUV couldn't follow? A lot of ifs. The branch appeared on his left, a gap in the trees barely wider than his truck. Aaron didn't slow down, didn't give himself time to think. He yanked the wheel hard left. The truck plunged into the forest, branches scraping against the sides with sounds like fingernails on a chalkboard. The suspension screamed as they hit ruts and hidden rocks. Behind them, Aaron heard the SUV braking hard, the screech of tires fighting for purchase on the loose dirt. He'd bought them a few seconds. Maybe. The trail, if you could call it that, was a nightmare. The truck pitched and rolled like a ship in a storm. Overhead, branches created a canopy so thick it turned mid-morning into twilight. The woman in the back seat had stopped groaning, either unconscious or dead. Aaron couldn't tell. Please work, Aaron muttered, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. The Forest Service road had to be close. Half a mile, maybe less. If they could just... The truck dropped suddenly, the front wheels slamming into a depression Aaron hadn't seen. The impact snapped his teeth together and sent a spike of pain through his jaw. The engine sputtered. No, not now. Come on, baby, Aaron pleaded, easing off the gas and then pressing down again. The engine caught, held, kept running. And then, like a miracle, the trees opened up and they burst onto a dirt road, a real road, graded and maintained. Aaron turned right without thinking, heading downhill, and pushed the speedometer as high as he dared. Behind them, the forest remained empty. No black SUV, no gunshots, just dust and morning light. Lily slowly uncurled, her face streaked with tears. Dad, what's happening? Aaron realized he didn't have an answer, not one that would make sense, not one that would make her feel safe. I don't know, Bug, he said honestly, but we're okay. We're going to be okay. It was a lie. He could feel it in his bones. Whatever they'd stumbled into back there in the forest, it was far from over. And the woman in his back seat, the woman who somehow knew his name, held the answers he needed, if she lived long enough to tell him. Aaron pressed harder on the gas and tried not to look in the rearview mirror, where the forest behind them seemed to watch and wait. The truck's engine rattled like a dying man's last breath as Aaron pushed it down the mountain road, gravel spitting from beneath the tires. His hands ached from gripping the steering wheel, his shoulders locked in a permanent hunch of tension. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, expecting to see that black SUV materialize from the forest like something conjured from a nightmare. But the road behind them remained empty. Lily sat frozen in the passenger seat, Mr. Whiskers crushed against her chest so tightly the stuffed rabbit's button eyes bulged. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the trail, and Aaron didn't know if that was better or worse. The silence gave him time to think, but thinking only led to questions he couldn't answer and scenarios that made his chest tighten with panic. Dad? Lily's voice was small, barely audible over the engine noise. Yeah, Bug. Is that lady gonna die? Aaron glanced in the rearview mirror at the woman sprawled across the back seat. She hadn't moved in the last 10 minutes. Blood had soaked through the blanket he'd used to cover her, spreading in a dark stain that made his stomach turn. He'd seen plenty of injuries working at the mill, crushed fingers, gashed arms, one horrific incident involving a chainsaw that still gave him nightmares. But this was different. These weren't accidents. Someone had done this to her deliberately, methodically. No, Aaron said, though he had no idea if it was true. She's going to be fine. We're going to get her help. You promise? Aaron felt the weight of that question settle on his shoulders like a physical thing. He'd learned not to make promises he couldn't keep. After Sarah died, after he'd promised Lily that Mommy would get better, that the treatments would work, that everything would be okay. After all those promises turned to ash in his mouth, he'd sworn to himself that he'd never lie to his daughter again. But right now, with terror still singing through his veins and blood on his back seat, the truth felt too heavy to share. I promise we'll do everything we can, he said carefully. It seemed to satisfy her, or at least give her enough comfort to lean back against the seat and close her eyes. Aaron wished he could do the same, could let the adrenaline drain away and pretend for just a moment that they were heading home from a normal Sunday outing. Berry buckets full, nothing but jam making and quiet dinner ahead of them. Instead, his mind raced through scenarios. They needed to get to a hospital. Pine Haven General was 30 minutes away if he took Highway 20, But Highway 20 meant main roads, meant being visible, meant potentially running into whoever had been chasing them. The woman in the back seat had begged him not to let them find her. Whoever they were had guns and the willingness to use them in broad daylight. And they knew his name. That was the detail that kept circling back, sharp and poisonous. The woman had whispered it. Miles. Aaron Miles. Like she'd been expecting him, like this whole thing had been orchestrated somehow. But that was impossible. He was nobody. Just a safety inspector at a lumber mill, a single dad trying to make it through each day without falling apart. Nobody had any reason to know who he was, much less target him. Unless this wasn't about him at all. Unless he'd just been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now he'd dragged his daughter into something dark and dangerous. Aaron's phone sat in the center console cup holder, the screen dark. He should call 911. That was the logical thing, the safe thing. But when he reached for it, his hand hesitated. The woman had said, "Don't let them find me." Not call the police or get me to a hospital. Just that one desperate plea, like she feared discovery more than death. What if the people chasing her had connections? What if calling the authorities would just lead her killers right to them? Aaron shook his head, trying to clear the paranoid thoughts. This was America, not some action movie. The police were there to help. He needed to trust the system, needed to believe that civilization was more than just a thin veneer over chaos. But his hand still didn't pick up the phone. The woman made a sound then, a low, rattling moan that raised every hair on Aaron's neck. He glanced back again and saw her eyelids fluttering, one swollen nearly shut, but the other trying to open. Her lips moved, forming words without sound. "Hey," Aaron called back to her, trying to keep his voice calm. "Stay still. You're safe. We're getting you help." Her good eye focused on him, and Aaron saw recognition there, not of him, but of consciousness returning, awareness flooding back along with what he could only imagine was excruciating pain. She tried to sit up, her bound wrists making the movement clumsy and desperate. "Easy," Aaron said. "Don't try to move. You're hurt pretty badly." "Where?" Her voice came out as a croak, barely human. "Where are you taking me?" "Hospital. You need a doctor." "No!" The word exploded from her with surprising force. She lurched forward, her bound hands reaching toward the front seat. "No hospital. They'll find me. They'll—" Her body convulsed, a coughing fit that brought up blood, spattering across the seat. Lily made a small, frightened sound and turned away, pressing her face against the passenger window. Aaron eased off the gas, pulling the truck onto the shoulder. They were still in the mountains, still miles from anywhere, surrounded by forests that pressed close on both sides. He put the truck in park and twisted around to face the woman directly. "Who are you?" he demanded. "And how the hell do you know my name?" The woman's chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath. Blood stained her teeth, and the left side of her face had swollen so badly it distorted her features. But her one good eye held his gaze with fierce intensity. "My name is Claire Bennett," she said, each word clearly costing her. "I'm a journalist. Investigative. I was working on a story." "What kind of story gets you stuffed in a trunk and left to die?" Claire's laugh was bitter, broken. "The kind that matters. The kind people kill to keep quiet." Aaron felt his frustration rising, mixing dangerously with the fear that still thrummed through him. "That's not an answer. You knew my name. How? Why?" Claire closed her eye, and for a moment Aaron thought she'd lost consciousness again. But then she spoke, her voice softer now, almost apologetic. "I didn't know your name. Not before. But when they had me, when they were questioning me—" She paused, swallowing hard. "They mentioned it. Said they knew someone in the area, someone who could be, leveraged. A safety inspector at Cascade Lumber, single father, easy target if they needed one." The words hit Aaron like a physical blow. "What?" "I'm sorry," Claire whispered. "I'm so sorry. I tried not to tell them anything, but they—" Her voice broke, and tears mixed with the blood on her face. "They hurt me. For days. And I heard things, plans. Your name came up. I didn't understand why until now." Aaron's vision tunneled, The truck suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. They'd been talking about him, planning something. And he'd walked right into it by finding Claire, by playing the hero instead of calling the cops and walking away. "Dad?" Lily's voice was tiny, frightened. "What's she talking about?" "It's okay, Bug," Aaron said automatically, though nothing was okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. He looked at Claire, this broken stranger who'd just blown apart his understanding of reality. "What are they planning? What do they want with me?" "I don't know," Claire said. "I only caught pieces. But there's a network, a big one. Human trafficking, smuggling, drugs. It's all connected. They use these forests, these back roads. People disappear up here all the time, and nobody notices because it's so remote, but I noticed. I've been investigating for 6 months, and I got too close. They grabbed me in Portland, brought me up here to—" She trailed off, and Aaron didn't need her to finish the sentence. "Why didn't they just kill you?" The question came out harsher than he'd intended. "They were going to," Claire said simply. "But they wanted information first. Names of sources, what I'd published, who else knew. I gave them enough to buy time, but not enough to matter. And then last night something changed. They were arguing, the men guarding me. Something about a shipment, about needing to move it before someone arrived. They got sloppy. I managed to—" She held up her bound wrists. "I had a piece of broken glass, cut through part of the zip tie. Not enough to break free, but enough to give me a chance. When they moved me to the car, I fought. Got one of them in the eye with my thumb. They shoved me in the trunk and left me there while they dealt with whatever crisis had come up." "How long were you in there?" "I don't know. Hours. I thought I was going to die in that darkness." Her voice cracked. "And then I heard voices. A man and a little girl. And I thought maybe—" She didn't finish, but Aaron understood. She'd thought maybe she had one last chance. And she'd been right, though Aaron wished to God she'd been wrong, that he'd never found that car, never opened that trunk. "The men who grabbed you," Aaron said. "Did you see their faces? Would you recognize them?" Claire nodded weakly. "3 of them. The leader calls himself Dmitri. Russian accent, big guy, tattoos on his hands. The other 2, one was younger, nervous, called him Kyle or Keith, something like that. The 3rd was older, cold, didn't talk much. But I heard Dmitri call him Captain once." "Captain?" Aaron repeated. "Like military?" "Maybe. Or just a nickname. But he gave the orders when Dmitri wasn't around. And he's the one—" Claire's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "He's the one who did this." She gestured weakly to her battered face, her tortured body. Aaron felt rage surge through him, hot and clean, cutting through the fear. He wanted to find this man, this captain, and make him pay for every bruise, every burn, every moment of terror he'd inflicted. But vengeance was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not with Lily in the truck. Not with armed men potentially hunting them. "We need to get you medical attention," Aaron said firmly. "I don't care what you say about hospitals. You're bleeding internally and you need—" "No hospitals," Claire insisted, her voice gaining strength. "Please, you don't understand. These people have reach, resources. If I show up at a hospital with these injuries, with these marks—" She gestured to what Aaron now realized were symbols carved into her skin. "They'll know. They'll come. And your daughter—" She left the threat unfinished, but it hung in the air like poison gas. Aaron looked at Lily, who was watching them both with wide, terrified eyes. His daughter, his whole world. The reason he got up every morning, the reason he kept going after Sarah died. He would not, could not, let anything happen to her. "Fine," he said, making a decision that went against every instinct. "No hospital. But we can't stay in the truck. We need somewhere safe to figure this out." "Where?" Claire asked. Aaron's mind raced through options. His house was out. If they knew his name and workplace, they probably knew where he lived. Tom's place wasn't much better. The mill had decent security, but it would be closed on Sunday, and showing up there would raise questions he couldn't answer. They needed somewhere remote, somewhere off the grid, somewhere these people wouldn't think to look. And then it came to him. "My father's cabin," he said. "It's about an hour from here, deeper in the mountains. Nobody knows about it except family. The old man built it himself back in the 70s, completely off-grid. No phone, no internet, but it's got supplies and it's invisible if you don't know exactly where to look. Can we trust it? Claire asked. Can we trust anything right now? Aaron shot back. He was already pulling the truck back onto the road, accelerating hard. It's the best option we've got. The drive took them deeper into the Cascade Range, onto roads that got progressively smaller and rougher. Aaron navigated from memory, taking turns that weren't marked on any GPS, following landmarks only he would recognize. A lightning struck Douglas Fir, a boulder shaped like a breaking wave. The remains of an old ranger station reduced to nothing but a stone chimney reaching toward the sky like an accusatory finger. Lily had curled up in the passenger seat, her eyes closed but her body tense in a way that told Aaron she wasn't sleeping. She was just trying to escape, to retreat into herself the way she had after Sarah died. The thought of his daughter being traumatized again, of having to rebuild her sense of safety all over, made Aaron want to scream. Claire had gone quiet in the back seat, conserving her energy. Her breathing was labored, each inhale sounding wet and painful. Aaron kept checking the mirror, watching for signs that she was fading, that her injuries were finally claiming her. He'd meant what he said about getting her help, but first they needed to be safe. First they needed to understand what they were up against. The turnoff to his father's cabin was barely visible, marked only by 2 trees that had grown in a distinctive V shape. Aaron almost missed it, braking hard at the last second and jerking the wheel left. The truck bounced down what could charitably be called a path, more an absence of trees than an actual road. Branches scraped the sides, and more than once Aaron heard the undercarriage scrape against rocks with sounds that made him wince. But then the trees opened up, and there it was. The cabin sat in a small clearing, built from rough-hewn logs that had weathered to a silvery gray. It was small, maybe 800 square feet, with a covered porch that sagged in the middle and a metal roof green with moss. To most people, it would look like a shack, abandoned and forgotten. But to Aaron, it was a lifeline. His father had brought him here every summer as a kid, teaching him to fish in the creek that ran 100 yards behind the cabin, to track deer through the forest, to find north without a compass. After the old man died 5 years ago, heart attack at 62, sudden and mean, Aaron had inherited the place but rarely visited. Too many memories, too much weight. Now those memories might save their lives. Aaron killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening. The forest here felt different than the place they'd fled, older somehow, more patient. Birds sang in the canopy overhead. A woodpecker hammered somewhere in the middle distance. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds, utterly at odds with the violence they'd just escaped. "Stay here," Aaron told Lily, touching her shoulder gently. "Let me make sure it's clear." He grabbed the crowbar from the truck bed, the same one he'd used to open Claire's trunk, and approached the cabin. The front door was secured with a heavy padlock, but Aaron had the key on his key ring right next to his house and truck keys. The lock was rusted from years of exposure, and it took some wiggling, but finally it clicked open. The interior was dark and smelled of dust and mouse droppings. Aaron propped the door open to let in light and air, then did a quick sweep of the space. One main room with a wood stove, a small kitchen area with a hand pump for water from a well, 2 tiny bedrooms, and an outhouse out back. The furniture was basic: a table, some chairs, 2 narrow beds with bare mattresses. Shelves lined one wall, stocked with canned goods and supplies his father had maintained religiously. The old man had been a prepper before the term became trendy, convinced that civilization was always one disaster away from collapse. Looking at those dusty cans of beans and corn, Aaron felt a surge of gratitude for his father's paranoia. He returned to the truck to find Claire trying to sit up, her movements weak and uncoordinated. Lily had gotten out and was standing by the passenger door, hugging herself, looking small and lost. "Come here, Bug," Aaron said, and Lily ran to him, pressing her face against his stomach. He wrapped his arms around her and held tight, feeling her shake with silent sobs. "You're so brave," he whispered into her hair. "So incredibly brave. But we're safe now, okay? We're going to be okay." Another promise he couldn't guarantee, but what else could he say? With Lily's help, Aaron managed to get Claire out of the truck and into the cabin. The journalist's legs barely supported her weight, and by the time they'd maneuvered her onto one of the beds, she was gasping in pain. In the better light, Aaron could see the full extent of her injuries, and it made him sick. The cigarette burns on her shoulders, the deep bruising around her ribs that suggested breaks. The symbols carved into her forearm, a triangle with some kind of design inside it, deliberately precise. "I need to cut those zip ties," Aaron said, examining her bound wrists. "It's going to hurt." "Everything already hurts," Claire said, managing a ghost of a smile. "Do it." Aaron used his pocket knife, carefully sliding the blade under the plastic and sawing through. The moment the ties released, blood rushed back into Claire's hands, and she cried out, clutching her wrists against her chest. The skin beneath was raw, the tissue damaged from hours or days of restriction. "We need to clean these wounds," Aaron said, looking around helplessly. "And you need antibiotics, fluids, probably surgery." "First aid kit," Claire gasped. "Do you have one?" Aaron remembered his father's supplies. The old man had kept an extensive medical kit, updated annually. Aaron went to the shelves and found it. A large plastic box with a red cross on the lid. Inside was a treasure trove: bandages, antiseptic, pain medication, even a few emergency medications that were technically prescription, but that his father had acquired through means Aaron had never asked about. He brought the kit to Claire, who pawed through it with shaking hands, pulling out items and examining them. Despite her condition, her movements had purpose, training. She selected antibacterial ointment, clean bandages, a bottle of ibuprofen, and something else, a packet of pills Aaron didn't recognize. "Antibiotics," Claire explained, reading his expression. "Amoxicillin. If these wounds get infected—" She didn't finish the thought. "How do you know what to do?" Aaron asked. "Worked as an EMT for 3 years before I became a journalist," Claire said, swallowing pills dry, grimacing at the taste. "Figured if I was going to chase dangerous stories, I should know how to patch myself up." She went to work on her own injuries with an efficiency that was almost disturbing, cleaning wounds that made Aaron wince to look at, wrapping her ribs tightly to support what were almost certainly fractures. The whole time, her face remained set in an expression of grim determination, occasionally punctuated by sharp gasps of pain she couldn't quite suppress. Lily had retreated to a corner of the cabin, sitting with her back against the wall, Mr. Whiskers in her lap. She watched everything with huge eyes, her usual spark and energy completely extinguished. Aaron wanted to go to her, to comfort her, but he couldn't leave Claire. The journalist was barely holding on, and if she crashed— "You should eat something," Aaron said, pulling down cans from the shelf. "Get your strength up." "Can't," Claire said. "Not yet. Stomach's too messed up, but water would help." Aaron worked the hand pump in the kitchen area until water gushed out, rust-colored at first, but clearing after a few seconds. He filled a cup and brought it to Claire, who drank in small sips, her hands shaking so badly she needed Aaron to steady the cup. "Thank you," she whispered when she'd finished, "for not leaving me. Most people would have." "Most people aren't stupid enough to pull someone out of a trunk and get shot at," Aaron said, trying for humor and failing. "Look, we need to figure out our next move. Those men, Dimitri and the others, how hard are they going to look for you?" Claire's expression darkened. "As hard as they need to. I'm a loose end, Aaron. I know things, names, places, details about their operation. They can't afford to let me talk." "And now they think I know those things too," Aaron said, the reality settling over him like a shroud. "Because I have you." "I'm sorry," Claire said again, and this time tears spilled down her cheeks, cutting tracks through the dried blood. "God, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to drag anyone else into this. But they mentioned you, and when you opened that trunk, I thought maybe it was fate or something. Maybe you were supposed to find me." "Fate," Aaron repeated bitterly. "Right. Because fate has been so kind lately." He walked to the window and stared out at the forest, at the trees standing silent and ancient, witnesses to human drama but ultimately indifferent to it. His phone sat in his pocket, still useless without signal, but even if he had service, who would he call? The police? And tell them that he'd found a woman who claimed some vague criminal network was after them both, that armed men had shot at his truck? He had no proof, no evidence beyond Claire's word and the bullet holes in his rear window. "We should rest," Claire said from the bed. Figure things out tomorrow. In daylight. But Aaron knew there would be no rest. How could he sleep knowing that somewhere out there, men with guns were hunting them? How could he close his eyes when every sound might be an engine approaching, footsteps on the porch, the kick of a door being breached? Dad? He turned to find Lily standing beside him, looking up with an expression so fragile it broke his heart. Are we going home? She asked. Aaron crouched down to her level, taking her small hands in his. Not yet, Bug. We need to stay here for a little while, just until we know it's safe. But what about school tomorrow, and my homework, and... Her voice cracked. I want to go home, Dad. Please. I don't like it here. I know, Aaron said, pulling her into a hug. I know, and I'm sorry. But right now, this is the safest place for us. And I promise... He stopped himself, remembering his vow not to make promises he couldn't keep. I'm going to do everything I can to get us home as soon as possible. Lily buried her face in his shoulder and cried, the kind of deep, racking sobs that came from a child who'd seen too much, been scared too deeply. Aaron held her and stroked her hair and made soothing sounds that felt hollow and useless. Over Lily's head, he caught Claire watching them, her expression haunted. Whatever story she'd been chasing, whatever truth she'd been trying to expose, it had cost her everything. And now it was costing Aaron and Lily, too. As afternoon sunlight slanted through the cabin windows, painting everything in shades of amber and gold, Aaron felt the weight of their situation settle fully onto his shoulders. They were trapped, hunted by men with resources and no regard for human life, isolated in a cabin with limited supplies and no way to call for help, and responsible for a woman who knew secrets people would kill to protect. The forest around them was beautiful in its indifference, and somewhere in that beauty, danger waited. Aaron carried Lily to the second bedroom and laid her down on the bare mattress, covering her with his jacket. She was already half asleep, exhaustion finally overwhelming fear. He sat beside her until her breathing evened out, until he was sure she'd actually drifted off. When he returned to the main room, Claire was sitting up, her back against the wall, staring at her bandaged hands. I need to know everything, Aaron said quietly, every detail about these people, about what you were investigating. Because right now, we're blind, and blind people don't survive what's coming. Claire looked up at him, and in her eyes, Aaron saw something he recognized, the look of someone who'd lost everything but refused to give up. It was the same look he'd seen in his own mirror after Sarah died. Okay, she said, I'll tell you everything. But Aaron, once you know, you can't unknow it. And these people, they don't forgive. They don't forget. Are you sure you want this weight? Aaron thought about his daughter sleeping in the other room, about the bullet holes in his truck, about the sensation of opening that trunk and finding a human being left to die like garbage. I'm already carrying the weight, he said. Might as well know what it is. So Claire began to talk, her voice soft but steady, weaving a story of corruption and violence that reached further than Aaron could have imagined. And with each word, the world as he knew it, safe, predictable, governed by laws and order, crumbled a little more, revealing the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface, in the spaces between civilization and wilderness. The sun continued its slow descent toward the horizon, and in the growing shadows of the cabin, two people who'd been strangers that morning formed an alliance born of desperation and necessity. They had no way of knowing that outside, in the forest they believed would shelter them, the hunt was already beginning. Claire's voice carried through the cabin like smoke, filling every corner with words that painted a picture Aaron wished he could unsee. She spoke for nearly an hour, pausing only to sip water or catch her breath when the pain became too intense. And with every sentence, Aaron felt the ground beneath him shift, the comfortable reality he'd inhabited dissolving into something far more sinister. The network she described wasn't some small-time operation run by local criminals. It was vast, sophisticated, reaching from the ports of Seattle down through Oregon and into California, with connections spreading east like roots from a poisonous tree. They moved people, women and children mostly, brought in through shipping containers and fishing vessels, promised work or reunification with family, only to find themselves trapped in debt bondage and worse. They moved drugs too, heroin and fentanyl from Mexico, distributed through a web of seemingly legitimate businesses. And they moved money, So much money that it required banks and lawyers and politicians to look the other way. The forest routes are key, Claire explained, her voice hoarse. Everyone watches the highways, the border crossings, the airports. But up here in the mountains, there are thousands of miles of logging roads, fire trails, old mining paths. You could move an army through these woods and nobody would know. They use the remoteness, the fact that local law enforcement is stretched thin, that people disappear up here all the time and it's written off as hikers getting lost or hunters having accidents. How did you find out about it? Aaron asked. He'd pulled a chair close to her bed, sitting forward with his elbows on his knees, trying to process information that felt like it belonged in a movie, not in his actual life. Started small, Claire said. I was doing a piece on missing persons cases in the Pacific Northwest, standard human interest stuff, trying to bring attention to cold cases. But I kept seeing patterns. Women who disappeared from truck stops along I-5. Men who vanished after taking day labor jobs that promised cash under the table. Kids who got into the wrong car outside a shelter. And they all had one thing in common. They were last seen in towns along the Cascade Corridor. She shifted on the bed, wincing as the movement pulled at her injured ribs. I started digging deeper. Found a source. A woman who'd escaped from a house in Eugene where they were holding trafficking victims. She told me about the routes they used to move people, about the camps deep in the national forest where they'd stage them before transport, about men who came and went with military precision, like it was an actual operation with command structure and everything. The captain, Aaron said. Claire nodded. She mentioned him, said he was in charge of security, that he'd been special forces or something before. The kind of man who could kill you 3 different ways before you finished screaming. She was terrified of him specifically. Did she give you a real name? No, just the nickname, and she made me promise never to publish anything that could identify her. She had a daughter, you see. She'd left the girl with her mother when she came to the U.S., promised to bring her over once she got established. That's how they hooked her, said they'd help reunite her with her child if she worked off her debt. But the debt never got smaller, it just grew, and the work, Claire's voice caught. The work destroyed her a little more each day. Aaron felt sick. Where is she now, this woman? Dead, Claire said flatly. 2 weeks after we talked. Overdose, according to the police report. But she didn't use drugs. She was clean, working 3 jobs, saving every penny to try to get her daughter here legally. It was a message, Aaron. They found out she'd talked to me and they sent a message. The cabin felt colder suddenly, despite the warmth of the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Aaron stood and walked to the wood stove, needing something to do with his hands. His father had left it stocked with kindling and logs, prepared as always for an emergency. Aaron began building a fire, not because they needed heat yet, but because the ritual of it, the careful arrangement of newspaper and small sticks, the strike of the match, the patient coaxing of flame, gave him a moment to think. How did they catch you? He asked as he worked. I got cocky, Claire admitted. I'd been careful for months, using encrypted communications, meeting sources in public places, keeping my investigation compartmentalized. But I found something big, a ledger, or at least photographs of one, showing transactions that went back years. Millions of dollars moving through shell companies, names of people involved. Real names, not just street names. I thought I had them. Thought I finally had enough to go to the FBI, to blow this whole thing open. She laughed, a bitter sound that turned into a cough. Aaron heard fluid in her lungs, a wet rattle that spoke of damage he couldn't fix with first aid kits and stolen antibiotics. But someone tipped them off, Claire continued when she could speak again. I don't know who, someone in my network, or maybe they'd been watching me all along and I was too arrogant to notice. They grabbed me outside my apartment in Portland. Broad daylight, busy street, just walked up with a gun pressed to my ribs and told me to get in the car, or they'd shoot the old man walking his dog 10 feet away. What was I supposed to do? You got in the car, Aaron said softly. I got in the car, Claire confirmed. Stupidest decision of my life, but also maybe the only one I could make. And they brought me up here to a house somewhere in the mountains. I never saw the outside, just the room where they kept me. Concrete floor, no windows, a drain in the center. Her voice went flat, emotionless, the way people spoke about trauma too fresh to fully process. They wanted names. They wanted to know who else I'd talked to, what I'd shared, where I'd hidden the evidence. And when I wouldn't tell them fast enough, they got creative. Aaron's hand stilled on the wood he was arranging. Claire, you don't have to. No, you need to know, she interrupted, her voice gaining strength. You need to understand what these people are capable of. Because they're coming, Aaron. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but they're coming. And when they do, you need to be ready to do things you never thought you'd do. The fire caught, flames licking up through the kindling, spreading warmth into the cabin. Aaron sat back on his heels and looked at Claire, really looked at her. In the growing firelight, her injuries seemed even more brutal, the shadows making the bruises darker, the burns angrier. But her eyes held steady, clear despite the pain that must be screaming through her body. The captain did this to you, Aaron said. It wasn't a question. Most of it. He's methodical, patient, knows exactly how much pain a human body can take before it shuts down, knows how to keep you right on that edge for hours. Claire held up her forearm, showing him the carved symbol. This was last. After 3 days of other things, after I'd given them just enough information to keep me alive, but not enough to really matter, he sat me in a chair, tied me down, and took his time. Said it was a mark, so that if I somehow got away, everyone would know I'd betrayed the family. Family, Aaron repeated. They call themselves a family? It's what these organizations do. Create loyalty through fear and ritual. Make people feel like they're part of something bigger, something unbreakable. The symbol means traitor. Anyone who sees it knows I'm marked for death. Aaron felt anger rising in him again, hot and righteous. We need to get this to the authorities. Real authorities, not local cops who might be compromised. FBI, Homeland Security, someone. With what evidence? Claire asked. I don't have the ledger anymore. They found where I'd hidden the photos, destroyed them, and my source is dead. It's my word against theirs, and I'm a woman who looks like she got into a bar fight, not a credible witness to a massive criminal conspiracy. You have the marks they carved into you, the injuries, proof of torture. Proof that someone tortured me, Claire corrected. Not proof of who or why, or that any larger organization exists. These people are smart, Aaron. They've been doing this for years without getting caught. They have lawyers, accountants, legitimate fronts, and they have protection at levels you wouldn't believe. I had a source in the state police who was feeding me information. Good cop. Honest. 20 years on the force. I tried to call him when I first realized I was being followed. His phone was disconnected. I checked later. He'd taken early retirement, moved to Florida. Wouldn't return my calls. They got to him somehow, scared him off or paid him off, I don't know which. Aaron stood and paced the cabin, his mind racing through options that all seemed to dead end in disaster. So what do we do? Just hide here forever? Wait for them to find us and hope we can, what, fight them off? I'm a mill inspector, not a soldier. I've never even fired a gun at a person. I know, Claire said quietly, and I hate that I've put you in this position. But here's what I do know. They'll be looking for me, but they won't be looking everywhere. They think I'm either dead already or too injured to get far. And they don't know about this cabin, about your connection to it. We have a window, maybe a few days, to figure out our next move. Which is? Claire was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant. When she spoke, her voice was measured, thoughtful. We need to get word to someone who can actually help, someone outside the local sphere of influence. I have a contact, an investigative journalist in Seattle who's been following similar cases. If I can reach him, if I can tell him what happened, he has the resources to dig deeper, to bring in federal attention the right way. How do we reach him from here? There's no phone, no internet. We don't, Claire said. Not from here. But there's a ranger station about 20 miles north of here. They'll have radio equipment, satellite phones. If we can get there, we can't, Aaron interrupted. You can barely sit up. You think you can hike 20 miles through mountain terrain? Then you go, Claire said simply. Leave me here with Lily. Take your truck, get to the ranger station, make the call. Aaron shook his head violently. I'm not leaving my daughter, and I'm not leaving you alone and defenseless. If they find this place while I'm gone, they won't, Claire insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. The truth settled over them both like a weight. Every option was bad. Staying meant eventually being found. Leaving meant splitting up, becoming vulnerable. Trying to reach authorities meant exposing themselves in transit, in places where they could be spotted, intercepted. They were trapped, and they both knew it. Aaron was about to speak when he heard it, a sound that froze the words in his throat. From the bedroom where Lily slept came a small, frightened whimper, followed by a word that made his heart stop. "Daddy?" He crossed the cabin in 3 strides and entered the bedroom to find Lily sitting up on the mattress, her face pale, her eyes wide with fresh terror. She was staring at the window, at something outside. "There's someone out there," she whispered. Aaron's blood turned to ice. He moved to the window slowly, carefully, positioning himself to see out while remaining mostly hidden behind the wall. The forest outside looked exactly as it had. Trees and shadows and dappled sunlight. Nothing moved. No sound disturbed the afternoon quiet. But then he saw it. A flash of something that didn't belong. There and gone so quickly he almost thought he'd imagined it. Movement where there should be none. A shape that was too regular to be natural. Someone was watching the cabin. Aaron's mind kicked into overdrive. He crossed back to the main room where Claire was trying to sit up, her face creased with alarm at his expression. "They're here," he said simply. "What? How?" "I don't know, but someone's outside, watching." Claire's face went from pale to ghostly. "It's not possible. They couldn't have tracked us here. We were careful." But even as she said it, Aaron was remembering. The drive from the logging road, the turns he'd taken, the dust his truck had kicked up. They'd been focused on escaping, on putting distance between themselves and danger. They hadn't been thinking about covering their tracks. And his truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 that half of Pine Haven would recognize, where his father had kept his hunting rifles. 2 of them, both bolt-action, both cleaned and oiled with the old man's typical obsessive care. Aaron grabbed one, his hands shaking as he checked the action, then searched for ammunition. He found a box of .308 cartridges and began loading, the bullets feeling heavy and alien in his hands. "Aaron," Claire said, her voice sharp, "if you fire at them, they'll fire back, and this cabin won't stop bullets." "What do you want me to do?" Aaron snapped, his fear manifesting as anger. "Let them walk in here and take us?" Before Claire could answer, the sound of an engine cut through the forest quiet. Not close, not yet, but getting closer. Aaron moved back to the window and saw it. Headlights piercing the shadows between the trees, approaching on the same path he'd taken. A black SUV, moving slowly, deliberately, like a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. Aaron's mind fragmented into a dozen different scenarios, each one ending in disaster. Fight, and they'd be outgunned. Run, and they'd be caught in the open. Surrender, and they'd be killed. The options cycled through his head with dizzying speed, and under it all was the image of Lily's terrified face, the trust in her eyes that said Daddy would fix this. Daddy would make it okay. But Daddy didn't know how. The SUV pulled into the clearing and stopped about 30 yards from the cabin. For a long moment, nothing happened. The engine idled, a low rumble that seemed to make the air vibrate. Aaron crouched by the window, rifle in his hands, watching. Claire had managed to get to her feet and was moving toward Lily's room, her steps unsteady but determined. Then the SUV's doors opened. 2 men got out on the driver's side, and Aaron's stomach dropped as he recognized the description Claire had given. The first was massive, 6'4" at least, with shoulders like a linebacker and arms covered in tattoos that were visible even at this distance. Dimitri, it had to be. The other was younger, nervous-looking, his movements quick and jerky. Kyle or Keith, the one Claire said was green, untested. But it was the third man who emerged from the passenger side that made Aaron's blood run cold. Older, moving with the economical grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime in violence. He wore dark clothing, tactical pants, and a jacket that probably hid body armor. And in his hands, held with casual expertise, was a rifle that made Aaron's hunting weapon look like a toy. The captain had found them. Aaron's hands tightened on his rifle as the 3 men surveyed the cabin, talking among themselves too quietly for him to hear. The captain pointed to something, the truck, probably, confirming they had the right place. Then he gestured, and the younger man began moving around the cabin's perimeter, covering the back exit. They were being tactical, professional. This wasn't some hasty assault. They'd done this before. Aaron made his decision. He crossed to Lily's room where Claire was gathering his daughter into her arms, the journalist's face tight with pain but determined. "There's a root cellar," Aaron said quietly. "Access through a trap door in the floor of this room, hidden under that rug. My dad used it for food storage. It's not much, but it's something." "They'll find it," Claire said. "Maybe, but it gives you a chance. I'm going to try to talk to them. Buy time. If it goes bad..." He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say out loud what would happen if he failed. Claire understood anyway. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Don't die for me," she said fiercely. "I'm not worth it." "This isn't about you," Aaron said, looking at Lily. "This is about her. She doesn't see any more violence. She doesn't lose another parent. That's the line." He kissed Lily's forehead, tried to memorize the feel of her in that moment, the softness of her hair, the particular way she smelled like strawberry shampoo and pine sap. "I love you, Bug," he whispered. "Whatever happens, remember that." "Daddy, no," Lily sobbed, clinging to him. "Don't go out there, please." It nearly broke him, but Aaron gently pried her hands away and placed them in Claire's. "Keep her safe," he told the journalist. "That's all that matters." Then, before he could lose his nerve, before the weight of what he was about to do could paralyze him, Aaron walked back into the main room. He set the rifle down on the table, keeping it within reach but not immediately threatening, and moved to the front door. Outside, the captain had advanced to about 15 yards from the cabin, close enough to talk, far enough to react if things went sideways. Dmitri stood behind him, hand resting on a pistol holstered at his hip. The nervous young man was out of sight, presumably covering the back. Aaron opened the door and stepped onto the porch, hands visible and empty. The late afternoon sun hit him full in the face, momentarily blinding. When his vision cleared, he found himself staring into the coldest eyes he'd ever seen. The captain smiled, but it didn't touch those eyes. "Aaron Miles," he said, his voice surprisingly soft, cultured even. "You've been quite difficult to find." "Don't know what you're talking about," Aaron said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I'm just up here at my dad's cabin." "Don't want any trouble." "Of course you don't. Nobody ever does." The captain took a step forward, and Aaron's muscles tensed, ready to dive back inside. But the man simply stopped and tilted his head slightly, like a bird examining an insect. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me where the woman is, the one you took from the forest. And then you're going to get in that truck and drive away with your daughter, and we're going to forget this whole unfortunate incident happened." "I don't know what woman you mean," Aaron lied. The captain's smile widened slightly. "Please don't insult my intelligence. We tracked your truck from the logging trail. We found the abandoned vehicle with its trunk open and you fingerprints all over it. And we know you didn't call the police, which means you either have the woman with you or you killed her and disposed of the body. Given that you're a single father with no criminal record, I'm betting on the former." Aaron's heart hammered in his chest. His mouth was dry, his palms sweating. Every instinct screamed at him to grab the rifle, to start shooting, to go down fighting. But he thought of Lily hiding beneath the floorboards, and he held himself still. "Even if I did find someone," Aaron said carefully, "even if I brought her here, what makes you think I'd just hand her over to the people who did that to her?" "Because you're a smart man," the captain said. "Smart enough to know when you're outmatched. Smart enough to understand that protecting a stranger isn't worth your daughter's life." The threat was implicit but clear, hanging in the air between them like a noose. Aaron felt fury surge through him, bright and hot, cutting through the fear. "You threaten my daughter, and this conversation ends very differently," he said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. For the first time, something flickered in the captain's expression. Respect, maybe, or surprise that this civilian had found a backbone. "Fair enough," he said. "Let me rephrase. Your daughter is innocent in this. She doesn't deserve to be caught in something that has nothing to do with her. The woman you found is a threat to an organization that has invested significant resources in remaining operational. She has information that could hurt a lot of people, destroy a lot of lives. She's also badly injured and needs medical attention you can't provide here. Give her to us, and you walk away. You have my word." The word of a man who tortures journalists, Aaron said. Forgive me if I'm not impressed. The captain's expression hardened. I do what's necessary. No more, no less. And if you force me to come in there and take her, I'll do that too. But it won't go well for anyone. Your daughter will see things no child should see. You'll die badly, and the woman will end up with us anyway, so why not save everyone the trauma? Aaron's mind raced. He needed time, needed to think, but time was the one thing he didn't have. In minutes, maybe seconds, this was going to turn violent, and he had no illusions about how that would end. I need to think about it, Aaron said. Give me a minute. You have 30 seconds, the captain replied. After that, we come in. Aaron started to turn, to go back inside, when movement at the tree line caught his eye. For a moment he thought it was the young man circling back, but the shape was wrong, the position all wrong. And then he saw it clearly. Another vehicle, partially hidden in the trees about 50 yards behind the SUV. Someone else was here, watching, waiting. The realization hit Aaron like electricity. They weren't alone. There was another player in this, someone the captain either didn't know about or hadn't accounted for. It changed everything. Or maybe it changed nothing. But it was information, and right now, information was the only weapon Aaron had. He turned back to face the captain, buying precious seconds, his mind working frantically. If I give you the woman, he said, how do I know you'll keep your word? How do I know you won't kill us anyway? You don't, the captain said simply. But you don't have much choice. Clock's ticking, Mr. Miles. 20 seconds. Behind the cabin, Aaron heard a sound, a door creaking, footsteps on wood. The young nervous man getting into position for the assault. Dmitri had moved slightly to the left, creating a crossfire angle. They were professionals, and they were preparing for violence. Aaron had run out of time and options. His hand moved toward his pocket, and instantly both the captain and Dmitri tensed, weapons starting to rise. Just my phone, Aaron said quickly, moving slowly. I want to call someone, make sure my daughter's protected if this goes bad. No calls, the captain said. Step away from the cabin, now. Or what? Aaron challenged, finding courage he didn't know he possessed. You shoot me right here? Prove to my daughter that monsters are real? If necessary, the captain said, and Aaron believed him completely. The moment stretched, crystalline and fragile. Aaron could hear his own heartbeat, could feel sweat running down his back despite the cool mountain air. In his peripheral vision, the shape in the trees shifted again, and this time Aaron caught a glint of something. Glass, metal, he couldn't tell. And then everything happened at once. The front window of the cabin exploded outward in a shower of glass. A gunshot cracked through the clearing, echoing off the surrounding trees. Dmitri staggered back, red blooming on his shoulder. The captain dove for cover behind the SUV with inhuman speed, his rifle coming up. Aaron threw himself backward through the cabin door as bullets stitched across the porch, sending splinters flying. He hit the floor hard, rolling, scrambling for the rifle he'd left on the table. Outside, the gunfire intensified. Multiple shooters now, the crack of the captain's rifle mixing with the heavier boom of something else, something powerful enough to punch through the SUV's door panel. Claire appeared in the doorway to the bedroom, Lily wrapped in her arms, both of them wide-eyed with terror. What's happening? She screamed over the noise. I don't know, Aaron yelled back. Stay down! He reached the table, grabbed the rifle, and moved to a window on the side of the cabin that faced the trees. Through the shattered glass, he could see chaos. The mysterious vehicle had moved into view now. A lifted pickup truck with no plates, and standing in its bed was a figure in dark clothing and a ski mask, firing a hunting rifle with devastating accuracy. Dmitri was on the ground, clutching his wounded shoulder, trying to drag himself behind the SUV. The captain had taken up a defensive position and was returning fire, but he was pinned, unable to advance or retreat effectively. The young nervous man appeared around the back of the cabin, his pistol up, looking for a target. Aaron didn't think, didn't hesitate. He brought the rifle to his shoulder and fired through the window. The shot went wide. He'd never been a great marksman, and fear made his hands shake, but it was close enough. The young man yelped and dove for cover behind Aaron's truck, firing blindly in Aaron's direction. Bullets punched through the cabin walls, high and to the left, missing everyone but making Claire scream. Get to the cellar, Aaron shouted. Go now! He fired again, keeping the young man pinned while Claire half-dragged, half-carried Lily back to the bedroom. Aaron could hear them struggling with the trap door, the old hinges protesting. Outside, the battle had shifted. The figure in the pickup was moving, advancing on the captain's position with the casual confidence of someone who knew they had the advantage. The captain was good, professional, controlled, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. He fired a burst that forced the attacker to duck, then used the moment to sprint for better cover behind a large Douglas fir. It was the opening Dmitri needed. The big Russian had pulled himself together, his wounded shoulder apparently not enough to stop him. He rose from behind the SUV, pistol tracking toward the figure in the truck bed. Aaron saw what was about to happen, saw the angle, the clean shot Dmitri would have. And without thinking about consequences or morality or anything except the certainty that whoever was shooting at the captain was giving them a chance to survive, Aaron took aim. This time his shot was true. The bullet caught Dmitri in the chest, high and center, spinning him around and dropping him like a puppet with cut strings. Aaron felt the impact in his own chest, the weight of what he'd just done, the line he'd just crossed. He'd killed a man, actually killed him. The thought tried to break him, tried to drag him down into shock and horror. But there wasn't time. Outside, the captain had made a break for the SUV, abandoning Dmitri, focused now on survival. He fired a covering burst toward the mysterious pickup, then dove into the driver's seat. The SUV's engine roared to life. Tires spun in the dirt, kicking up a cloud that obscured everything. When it cleared, the SUV was racing away down the path, weaving between trees, the captain cutting his losses and retreating. The figure in the pickup truck tracked the SUV for a moment, rifle raised, but didn't fire. Instead, they lowered the weapon and turned to look directly at the cabin, directly at the window where Aaron stood. For a frozen moment, they stared at each other across the blood-soaked clearing. Aaron's finger remained on the trigger, ready to fire if this new threat turned their gun toward him. But the figure simply raised one hand in what might have been a wave or a salute, then dropped back into the pickup's cab. The truck reversed, turned, and disappeared into the forest, moving in a different direction than the fleeing SUV. Within seconds, the sound of its engine faded to nothing. Silence crashed back over the clearing like a wave, broken only by Aaron's ragged breathing and the ringing in his ears from the gunfire. He lowered the rifle slowly, his entire body shaking with adrenaline crash. In the clearing outside, Dmitri lay motionless, his blood darkening the dirt around him. Aaron had killed him. The fact repeated in his mind like a prayer or a curse, impossible to fully process. "Aaron?" Claire's voice came from behind him, weak and frightened. He turned to see her standing in the bedroom doorway, still holding Lily, both of them streaked with dust and cobwebs from the cellar. His daughter's face was buried against Claire's shoulder, her small body racked with sobs. "Is it over?" Claire asked. Aaron looked out at the clearing, at the body, at the bullet holes that now decorated his father's cabin. He thought about the captain escaping, about the mysterious savior who'd appeared from nowhere, about the fact that their hiding place was now compromised and covered in forensic evidence. "No," he said quietly. "It's just beginning." The silence after the gunfire felt wrong, too heavy, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Aaron stood frozen at the window, the rifle still warm in his hands, staring at Dmitri's body sprawled in the dirt. The dead man's eyes were open, staring at nothing, and a dark pool was spreading beneath him like a shadow seeking to swallow the earth. Aaron had killed him. That fact refused to settle into anything comprehensible, just kept bouncing around his skull like a marble in a tin can. His hand started shaking so badly he had to set the rifle down before he dropped it. "Aaron, we have to move!" Claire's voice cut through his paralysis. She'd lowered Lily to the floor and was leaning heavily against the doorframe, her face gray with pain and exhaustion. "The captain knows where we are now. He'll be back with reinforcements." "I killed him," Aaron said, the words feeling thick and foreign in his mouth. "I actually killed someone." "You saved our lives," Claire corrected firmly. "There's a difference." But was there? Aaron had pulled the trigger knowing exactly what would happen, had watched the bullet's impact spin Dmitri around like a broken toy. The moment replayed in his head with crystal clarity, the recoil against his shoulder, the crack of the shot, the way the big Russian's body had crumpled. No amount of justification could erase what he'd done. Lily's sobs brought him back to the present. She was curled on the floor, Mr. Whiskers clutched so tightly the stuffing was probably coming out the seams, her whole body shaking. Aaron crossed to her in 2 strides and dropped to his knees, gathering her into his arms. "I'm sorry, Bug," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry you had to see any of this." "I want Mommy," Lily wailed, the words muffled against his chest. "I want Mommy, and I want to go home, and I want everything to be normal again." Aaron felt something crack inside him, some final wall he'd been maintaining between himself and the full weight of their situation. His daughter was traumatized, possibly permanently damaged by what she'd witnessed. A man lay dead outside. More men would be coming, and the mysterious stranger who'd saved them had vanished without explanation, leaving more questions than answers. He was failing. Failing as a father, failing as a protector, failing at the one job that actually mattered. "Aaron," Claire said again, more urgently, "we need to make decisions, right now." He looked up at her, seeing the same fear in her eyes that he felt in his gut, but also something else, determination, the kind that came from having already survived hell and refusing to go back. She'd been tortured for days, left for dead, and she was still fighting. If she could do that, he could pull himself together. "Okay," Aaron said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Okay, what are our options?" Claire moved carefully to the table and sat down, one hand pressed to her ribs. "The captain retreated, but he's not done. Men like him don't give up, especially not after losing someone. He'll regroup, call in more people, and come back harder. We have maybe a few hours, probably less." "What about whoever helped us?" Aaron asked. "The person in the truck?" "I don't know. And I don't trust miracles," Claire said. "Maybe they were following the captain. Maybe they have their own agenda. Either way, we can't count on them coming back." Aaron stood up, lifting Lily with him, and carried her to the old sofa. She clung to him like she had when she was tiny, before Sarah got sick, before the world showed her how cruel it could be. He sat with her, keeping one arm around her shoulders while his mind raced through scenarios. "We can't stay here," he said. "That's obvious. My truck is probably recognizable now, and even if it's not, they know what it looks like. The moment we get on any main road, we're exposed." "We need to get to authorities we can trust," Claire said. "Real federal agents, not local cops who might be compromised. But we're miles from anywhere, and in my condition I can barely walk, much less hike out of these mountains." "What about the ranger station you mentioned?" Claire shook her head. 20 miles through rough terrain. It would take all night at least, and that's if I could even make it, which I can't." Aaron looked around the cabin, at the bullet holes in the walls, the shattered windows, the blood on his hands from where he'd cut himself on broken glass without noticing. His father had built this place as a refuge, a shelter from the world. Now it was a trap, compromised and surrounded by evidence of violence that would take forensics teams days to process. "There's another option," he said slowly, an idea forming. "It's risky as hell, but so is everything else." "I'm listening," Claire said. "My friend Tom, the one who texted me about abandoned cars this morning. He has a place about 40 miles from here, other side of the mountain. More importantly, he has resources. A satellite phone from his guide business, medical supplies because he leads wilderness trips, and connections to search and rescue that work directly with federal agencies for missing persons cases. Can you trust him?" "With my life," Aaron said without hesitation. Tom had been there after Sarah died, had shown up every day for 2 weeks just to sit with Aaron when the silence got too heavy, had taken care of Lily when Aaron couldn't function. He's solid, and he's not connected to anything around here. He moved up from California 5 years ago, no local ties except through me. Claire considered this, her good eye distant. "How do we get there? Your truck is compromised." "Tom also has a boat," Aaron said. "There's a lake about 3 miles from here, and it connects through a series of waterways to Lake Cascade, which is a mile from Tom's property. If we can get to the water, we can bypass the roads entirely." 3 miles, Claire repeated, looking down at her battered body. "I don't know if I can make it." "Then I'll carry you," Aaron said simply. "I got you this far. I'll get you the rest of the way." Lily had gone quiet against his side, her sobs fading to hiccups. She looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. Are we going to die, Daddy? The question hit him like a punch to the sternum. He wanted to lie, wanted to give her the comfortable fiction that everything would be fine, that Daddy would fix it all. But he'd promised himself after Sarah died that he wouldn't lie to his daughter, wouldn't shelter her from truth even when truth was terrible. I don't know, Bug, he said honestly, but I promise you this. I will fight with everything I have to keep you safe. And if it comes down to it, I will trade my life for yours without hesitation. Do you understand? You are the most important thing in the world to me. Lily nodded slowly, then buried her face against him again. Over her head, Erin met Claire's gaze and saw understanding there. She knew what he was really saying, that if they were caught, if it came down to it, he would make sure Lily and Claire had a chance to escape, even if it cost him everything. We need to move fast, Claire said. Gather what we need and go. Erin nodded and gently detached himself from Lily, kissing the top of her head. Stay right here, okay? Don't look outside. Just stay on this couch with Mr. Whiskers. He moved quickly, grabbing supplies from his father's well-stocked shelves, water bottles, energy bars, a first aid kit, a flashlight, matches. He found a backpack in the closet and stuffed everything inside, including the box of rifle ammunition. The rifle itself he slung over his shoulder, the weight of it a constant reminder of what he'd become in the last few hours. Claire had managed to stand and was at the window, looking out at Dimitri's body. We should check him, she said quietly. See if he has a phone, ID, anything useful. The thought of going near that body, of searching the pockets of a man he'd killed, made Erin's stomach turn. But she was right. Information was survival, and squeamishness was a luxury they couldn't afford. Stay here, he told her, then steeled himself and stepped outside. The late afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, beautiful and serene, a stark contrast to the violence that had erupted here. Erin approached Dimitri's body slowly, his rifle ready, even though the man was clearly dead. Up close, the damage was worse than he'd realized. The bullet had caught Dimitri just below the collarbone, probably hit something vital based on how quickly he'd dropped. Erin knelt and began searching, trying not to look at the dead man's face, at the surprised expression frozen there. He found a wallet with $300 in cash but no credit cards or identification, a cheap burner phone with no contacts saved, just a list of recent calls to unknown numbers, a set of keys that probably belonged to the SUV, and tucked into an ankle holster, a small revolver. He took it all, stuffing the items in his pockets with shaking hands. As he stood to leave, he noticed something else, a tattoo on Dimitri's neck, partially hidden by his collar. Erin tugged the fabric aside and saw it clearly, the same symbol that had been carved into Claire's arm, the triangle with intricate designs inside, a mark of belonging, or maybe of ownership. These people were everywhere, connected, organized, and Erin had just painted a target on himself by killing one of them. He hurried back inside where Claire was helping Lily into her jacket, moving slowly and carefully despite the obvious pain it caused her. The journalist looked even worse than before, if that was possible. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and the bandages Erin had applied were seeping red. "You're bleeding again," he said. "I'm always bleeding," Claire replied with dark humor. "Let's just get moving before I bleed out completely." Erin helped her into his father's heavy canvas jacket, several sizes too big but warm. She swayed on her feet, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "This is going to be rough," he warned. "Everything's been rough," Claire said. "What's a little more?" They left through the back door, moving into the forest on a path Erin remembered from childhood expeditions with his father. The undergrowth was thick here, salal and sword ferns creating a dense tangle that slowed their progress. Erin went first, breaking trail, with Lily close behind and Claire bringing up the rear, her breathing already labored from the exertion. The first half-mile was manageable. The ground sloped gently downward, and the trail, though overgrown, was still visible if you knew what to look for. But then the terrain changed, becoming steeper, rockier. Exposed roots threatened to trip them with every step. Claire stumbled twice in the first 10 minutes, barely catching herself on trees. "Stop," Erin said finally, watching her struggle. "This isn't working." "I can make it," Claire insisted, but her voice was weak. "No, you can't. Not like this." Erin turned to Lily, crouching down to her level. "Bug, I need you to be brave for me, okay? Really brave.
Can you do that? Lily nodded, though her eyes were huge with fear. I'm going to carry Claire. You're going to walk right next to me. Hold on to my belt so we don't get separated.
The path is going to get harder, but we're going to make it, all three of us together. You understand? I understand, Lily whispered. Aaron turned to Claire. This is going to hurt, he warned. Then before she could protest, he bent and lifted her in a fireman's carry, draping her across his shoulders. She gasped in pain, and he felt her tense against him. Sorry, he muttered. Just move, Claire gritted out. With Lily gripping his belt and Claire's weight across his shoulders, Aaron resumed walking. The going was brutal. Each step required careful placement to avoid roots and rocks. His back screamed within minutes, muscles protesting the load and the terrain. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cool mountain air. Behind him, Lily's breathing came in frightened little gasps, but she kept pace, never letting go of his belt. And Claire, despite the agony Aaron knew she must be feeling with every jostle and jar, stayed silent except for the occasional sharp intake of breath. They walked for an hour, maybe more. Time became elastic, measured only in the rhythm of footsteps and the growing ache in Aaron's shoulders and legs. The sun was sinking lower now, throwing long shadows through the trees. In another hour it would be dark, and navigating this terrain without light would be nearly impossible. How much farther? Claire asked, her voice thin. Half-mile, maybe, Aaron said, though honestly he wasn't sure. The landmarks he remembered from childhood expeditions had changed, or maybe his memory was faulty. Everything looked the same, just trees and more trees, endless forest that could swallow them whole. But then he heard it. The sound that meant salvation, or at least a chance at it, the gentle lap of water against a shore. Almost there, he said, finding reserves of energy he didn't know he had. Just a little more. They broke through the tree line onto a rocky beach. The lake stretched before them, dark and still, reflecting the burnt orange of the sunset sky. It was small, maybe a mile across, surrounded by forest that came right down to the water's edge. And tied to a rotting dock on the far side, barely visible in the fading light, was a small aluminum boat with an outboard motor. Aaron had forgotten about that boat. His father had kept it here for fishing trips, checked on it maybe twice a year. It might not even run anymore, but it was their only option. He lowered Claire to the ground as gently as he could. She collapsed immediately, lying on her back on the rocky shore, her chest heaving. Lily sat down beside her, exhausted and scared, but still holding together, still being brave. Rest here, Aaron said. I'm going to check the boat. He jogged around the lake shore, his legs burning with fatigue. The dock creaked alarmingly under his weight. The wood was soft with rot, half the boards missing. But the boat was there, and when Aaron pulled the tarp off, he found it in surprisingly good condition, his father's obsessive maintenance paying dividends even from the grave. There was even gas in the tank, though Aaron had no idea if it was still good. He checked the motor, said a silent prayer to whatever God watched over desperate fathers, and pulled the starter cord. Nothing. He pulled again, and again. On the fourth try, the motor coughed, sputtered, and caught, settling into a rough idle that sounded like music to Aaron's ears. He brought the boat around to where Claire and Lily waited, beaching it on the rocks. Getting Claire into the boat required coordination and care, her body so battered that every movement drew gasps of pain. But finally, they were all aboard. Claire lying in the bow, Lily huddled in the middle seat with Mr. Whiskers and Aaron at the motor, steering them out into the darkening water. The lake was calm, glassy smooth, and the little boat cut through it with barely a ripple. Aaron opened the throttle as much as he dared, racing against the dying light. Behind them, the shore receded, and with it the cabin, the body, the evidence of everything that had happened. For a moment, gliding across the water with the motor's drone filling the air, Aaron could almost pretend they were just a family on an evening boat ride, nothing more complicated than that. But then Claire spoke, her voice carrying over the motor. Aaron, there's something you need to know about why they mentioned your name. He looked at her, lying in the bow, her face illuminated by the last rays of sunset. What do you mean? I've been thinking about it, trying to piece together what I heard when they had me. They didn't just mention you randomly. They were planning something that involved Cascade Lumber. The mill? Why?
I don't know exactly, but I heard them talking about a shipment, something big coming through, and they needed someone inside the mill, someone who could look the other way or maybe help facilitate something. Your name came up as a potential target, someone vulnerable they could pressure or manipulate if needed. Aaron felt ice in his veins. They were going to use me. Or they were going to use Lily to make you cooperate, Claire said quietly. I'm sorry, Aaron, but you need to know this isn't random. You were on their radar before I ever ended up in that trunk. Finding me just accelerated their timeline. The implications crashed over Aaron like a wave. Even if they survived this, even if they got to Tom's place and contacted the authorities and somehow came out the other side alive, his life in Pine Haven was over. The mill, his job, his house, everything he'd built in the 3 years since Sarah died, all of it was compromised. They'd be looking over their shoulders forever, or they'd have to disappear completely, start over somewhere with new names and new lives. Either way, the world as Lily knew it was gone. Dad, look! Lily's voice snapped him back to the present. She was pointing ahead toward the far end of the lake where it narrowed into what Aaron remembered as a channel leading to the next body of water. At first he didn't see what had alarmed her, but then his eyes adjusted and he saw the lights, flashlights, multiple of them, moving along the shore, and the sound of engines growing louder coming from the direction they'd need to go. They found us, Claire said, struggling to sit up. They figured out where we were heading. Aaron's mind raced. They were in the middle of the lake with nowhere to hide, in a boat that would be visible to anyone looking. Going forward meant running straight into whatever was waiting at the channel. Going back meant returning to the compromised cabin and the dead body. There, Lily said, pointing to the eastern shore. Dad, remember? The old mine. Aaron followed her finger and felt his heart leap. There was an abandoned copper mine on the east side of the lake, its entrance hidden by vegetation and a partial cave-in. His father had shown it to him decades ago with strict warnings never to go inside, but Aaron remembered the location. He cranked the motor hard, turning them toward the eastern shore. The lights behind them shifted, tracking their movement. Shouts carried across the water, and then the sharp crack of gunfire. The first bullet hit the water 10 feet to their left, sending up a geyser. The second was closer. Claire dragged herself to where Lily sat frozen and covered the girl with her own body, protecting her with the only thing she had left to give. Aaron pushed the throttle as far as it would go, coaxing every bit of speed from the ancient motor. The shore rushed toward them, and he cut the motor at the last second, letting momentum carry them into the reeds and sedges that choked the shallows. They hit with a crunch that threw everyone forward. Aaron was up immediately, hauling the boat further onto shore, then grabbing Lily and pulling her out. Claire tried to stand and collapsed, her legs giving out completely. I can't, she gasped. Aaron, I can't walk anymore. The lights were closer now, converging on their position. Aaron could hear engines, multiple vehicles, moving fast along the rough trail that circled the lake. They had minutes at best. He made a decision born of desperation. Lily, run to that big rock formation. He pointed to an outcropping about 30 yards up the slope. Hide behind it and don't come out for anyone but me. Anyone else shows up, you stay hidden and stay quiet. Promise me. But Dad, promise me. The force in his voice made her flinch, and he immediately regretted it. He softened his tone. Please, Bug. I need to know you're safe. Lily's face crumpled, but she nodded and ran, disappearing into the darkening forest. Aaron watched until he saw her reach the rocks and vanish behind them, then turned to Claire. Can you shoot? He asked. Claire nodded, taking the pistol he offered her, the revolver he'd taken from Dimitri's body. I'm not very good, but yes. Then we make our stand here, Aaron said, checking his rifle, making sure it was loaded. We hold them as long as we can. Give Lily time to hide, to survive. That's all that matters now. Claire looked at him, and in her eyes Aaron saw understanding and gratitude and terrible guilt all mixed together. I'm sorry, she whispered, for all of this. Stop apologizing and start shooting when they get close, Aaron said, taking position behind a fallen log. The first vehicle appeared on the trail, not the black SUV from before, but a pickup truck with a spotlight mounted on the roof. The beam swept across the shore, searching, and found the abandoned boat almost immediately. More vehicles appeared. Aaron counted 3, maybe 4.
Too many. Far too many. But he'd known this was how it would end from the moment he'd opened that trunk and found Claire inside. Some decisions changed everything, and there was no going back. The spotlight swung toward their position, and Aaron squinted against the glare. He could see shapes moving behind it, coordinating. They knew he was here, knew he was armed. They'd be cautious, professional. "Show yourself, Mr. Miles," a voice called across the water, amplified by a bullhorn. Not the captain, someone else. "There's no escape. Make this easy on yourself and the girl." Aaron's finger tightened on the trigger. He thought about Sarah, about how she'd made him promise to take care of Lily no matter what. He thought about his daughter hiding behind the rocks, terrified and alone. He thought about everything he'd tried to build in the years since his wife died, all the effort he'd put into being a good father, into creating a safe and normal life. And then he thought about how none of that mattered if he let evil men win through fear and inaction. He raised the rifle, aimed at the spotlight, and fired. The light exploded in a shower of glass and sparks, plunging the shore back into darkness. And as return fire began ripping through the trees around him, as Claire started shooting beside him with grim determination, as the night filled with the sound of violence and chaos, Aaron felt a strange calm settle over him. He'd made his choice. Right or wrong, he'd chosen to fight rather than surrender, chosen to protect rather than preserve himself. And whatever happened in the next few minutes, at least Lily would know that her father had stood when it mattered most. The battle for their lives had begun, and Aaron Miles was done running. The darkness erupted into chaos. Muzzle flashes strobed through the trees like deadly fireflies, and the crack of gunfire echoed across the lake, bouncing off the surrounding mountains. Aaron fired, reloaded, fired again, his world narrowing to the mechanical rhythm of survival. Beside him, Claire's revolver barked out shots that were less accurate but no less determined. Return fire chewed up the forest around them. Bark exploded from trees. Bullets whined overhead or thudded into the fallen log they'd taken shelter behind, sending splinters flying. Aaron kept his head down, only rising to fire when he had a clear target, the silhouette of a man advancing too boldly, the flash of a weapon being aimed their direction. He had no idea if he was hitting anything. The darkness made accuracy nearly impossible, and fear made his hands shake despite his best efforts to control them. But accuracy wasn't the point anymore. The point was making them cautious, making them slow down, buying minutes that might somehow stretch into survival. "I'm out!" Claire shouted over the din, the revolver cylinder clicking empty. Aaron dug into his pocket and found Dimitri's extra ammunition. 6 bullets, that was all. He pressed them into Claire's palm. "Make them count!" She nodded, her face streaked with dirt and blood in the intermittent muzzle flashes, and began reloading with shaking hands. A bullet hit the log inches from her head, and she flinched but kept working. The attackers had spread out now, flanking their position. Aaron could see the movement in his peripheral vision, shapes ghosting through the trees to the left and right. They were being surrounded methodically, professionally. These weren't panicked criminals. They were executing a tactical operation, and Aaron and Claire were hopelessly outmatched. "They're flanking us!" Aaron yelled. "We have to move."
Where? Claire demanded, and it was a fair question. Behind them was the lake. To either side, armed men were closing in. Forward meant running directly into the main force, the mine. The thought came to Aaron like a lifeline. His father had shown him the entrance decades ago, hidden behind a rockfall and thick vegetation. If they could reach it, if they could get inside, it would at least give them cover, maybe even a defensive position that would be harder to assault. 30 yards up the slope, Aaron said, pointing toward where he remembered the entrance being. "There's a mine shaft. We can defend it better than this." "Can you make it?" he asked Claire. She looked at him, and even in the darkness, he could see the truth in her eyes. She was done. The firefight, the movement, the accumulated trauma of days of torture, her body had finally hit its limit. But she nodded anyway because what else was there to do? Aaron grabbed her arm and hauled her upright. She swayed, her legs barely holding her, but she stayed up through sheer force of will. They stumbled away from the log, moving upslope, Aaron half dragging Claire while trying to keep his rifle ready. A figure emerged from the trees to their left. Aaron spun, firing from the hip. The shot went wild,
but it forced the man to dive for cover, buying them precious seconds. They crashed through underbrush, branches whipping at their faces, lungs burning. The mine entrance appeared suddenly, a dark mouth in the hillside, partially obscured by a rockfall and decades of vegetation growth. Aaron pushed Claire toward it, and she crawled inside with the last of her strength. He fired twice more to discourage pursuit, then followed her into the darkness. The mine shaft was narrow, barely wide enough for a grown man, and the air inside was cold and damp, smelling of earth and rot. Aaron pulled vegetation across the entrance, hoping it would provide some concealment, then fumbled for the flashlight in his pack. The beam cut through absolute darkness, revealing rough-hewn rock walls that stretched back into the mountain. "How far does it go?" Claire gasped, leaning against the wall. "I don't know. My dad never let me explore it. Said the supports were rotten, that it could collapse any time." "Great," Claire said with bitter humor. "So we escaped being shot to die in a cave-in." Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Aaron could hear voices, shouting commands, coordinating. They knew where their prey had gone. It was only a matter of time before they came in after them. "Lily," Aaron said suddenly, panic surging through him. "I left her hiding, but if they search the area—" "She's smart," Claire interrupted. "She'll stay hidden. You told her to wait for you, and she will. Right now, we need to focus on staying alive so we can get back to her." Aaron knew she was right, but knowing didn't make the fear any less acute. His daughter was out there alone, in the dark, surrounded by armed men who wouldn't hesitate to use her as leverage. The thought of them finding her, touching her, hurting her, it made him want to scream. But screaming wouldn't help. Action would. Survival would. He moved deeper into the mine, sweeping the flashlight beam ahead. The shaft extended about 50 feet before it branched into two tunnels. Ancient support timbers lined the walls, many of them sagging or collapsed entirely. Claire had been right to be worried. This place was a death trap waiting to happen. But it was their death trap now. "Here," Aaron said, positioning himself at the branch point where he'd have clear lines of sight down both tunnels and back toward the entrance. "If they come in, they'll have to come single file. We can hold them here." Claire collapsed beside him, the revolver held loosely in her lap. In the flashlight's glow, Aaron could see how pale she'd become, how her breathing had turned shallow and labored. She was fading, and there was nothing he could do about it. "Aaron," she said quietly, "if they get past you, if it comes down to it, don't let them take me alive. Please. After what they did before, I can't." Her voice broke. "I can't go through that again." "It won't come to that," Aaron said, but the words felt hollow. "Promise me," Claire insisted, gripping his arm with surprising strength. "I'm probably dying anyway from internal bleeding or infection, but I get to choose how, and I choose quick and on my terms. Promise me you'll make it quick." Aaron looked at this woman he'd known for less than a day, this stranger who'd become an unlikely companion in hell, and he saw the same determination he'd seen in Sarah's eyes when she'd asked him to let her go, to stop the treatments that were only prolonging her suffering. He'd failed Sarah, had kept hoping for a miracle until the very end, had let her suffer longer than she needed to because he couldn't let go. He wouldn't make that mistake again. "I promise," he said quietly. Outside, the voices were getting closer. Aaron turned off the flashlight, plunging them into darkness so complete it felt solid. He raised the rifle, aiming by memory toward the entrance, and waited. The first flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping the interior of the mine. Aaron held his breath, his finger tense on the trigger. A shape appeared at the entrance, a man, moving cautiously, his weapon up and ready. Aaron fired. The muzzle flash blinded him temporarily, but he heard the impact, heard the grunt of pain and the sound of a body falling. The flashlight dropped, rolling across the mine floor, its beam spinning wildly before settling pointed at the ceiling. Shouts erupted outside. Return fire came blindly through the entrance, ricocheting off the rock walls with sparks and whining sounds that made Aaron's teeth ache. He pressed himself against the wall and kept his rifle aimed at the entrance, ready for the next person stupid enough to try. But they'd learned. No more single attackers. Instead, someone outside began talking. "Mr. Miles?" The voice was cultured, calm, instantly recognizable. The captain had found them. "This is getting tedious. You've killed 2 of my men now. That requires a response, you understand. But I'm willing to be reasonable. Aaron said nothing, just kept his rifle aimed at the darkness. Here's what's going to happen, the captain continued. You're going to send out the woman. In exchange, I'll let you and your daughter go. You can walk away from this. Go back to your quiet life, pretend none of this ever happened. We'll even ensure the police accept your story about self-defense. You'll be a hero, the man who saved a kidnapping victim from criminals. Everyone wins. Except Claire, Aaron called back. Except Claire, the captain agreed. But she's dead anyway, Mr. Miles. Even if you somehow escape tonight, she's a loose end that will be tied up eventually. Why let her cost you and your daughter your lives? She's nothing to you, a stranger you found in a trunk. Is she really worth dying for? The question hung in the air like poison gas. Aaron felt Claire tense beside him, waiting to hear how he'd answer. And the terrible truth was that the captain had a point. Claire was a stranger. He'd known her for hours, not years. His responsibility was to Lily, not to this journalist who'd chased a story into hell and dragged him along for the ride. The rational choice was obvious. Give them Claire, save his daughter, survive to see another day. But Aaron thought about Sarah, about how she'd spent her last months fighting not just for herself, but for others like her, raising money for cancer research even as the disease consumed her. She'd taught him that the measure of a person wasn't in the easy choices, but in the hard ones, in the moments when doing the right thing cost you everything. No deal, Aaron called back. Silence from outside, long enough that Aaron wondered if the captain had given up and left. But then the voice came again, and this time it carried an edge of genuine respect. You're a fool, Mr. Miles, but an admirable fool. Very well. We'll do this the hard way. What happened next, Aaron hadn't anticipated. Instead of another assault, instead of more gunfire, he heard a different sound, a mechanical grinding followed by a thump that made the entire mineshaft shudder. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling. What are they doing? Claire whispered. Aaron's blood turned to ice as understanding hit him. They're collapsing the entrance. They're going to bury us alive. Another impact, and this time the shuddering was stronger. A support timber cracked with a sound like a gunshot. More dust fell, becoming a steady stream. The entrance, already partially blocked by the rockfall, began to narrow as additional debris tumbled down. We have to get out! Aaron grabbed Claire and hauled her to her feet. Now! They stumbled deeper into the mine, away from the collapsing entrance, Aaron's flashlight beam jerking wildly as they moved. Behind them, the sounds of destruction continued, crashes and rumbles and the groan of old wood giving way. The air filled with dust that made breathing difficult, made their eyes water. The mine shaft branched again, and Aaron chose randomly, pulling Claire down the left tunnel. It sloped downward, the ceiling getting lower, forcing them to duck. Aaron's lungs burned, his shoulders screamed from carrying Claire's weight, but he kept moving because stopping meant dying. The tunnel opened suddenly into a larger chamber, maybe 15 feet across, with 3 more tunnels branching off in different directions. Aaron swept his light across them, trying to decide which way to go, when he noticed something that made his heart leap. A breeze. Faint but definite, coming from the rightmost tunnel. Airflow meant an exit. Maybe. This way, he gasped, pulling Claire toward it. The tunnel was narrow, the ceiling so low Aaron had to crouch. His back screamed in protest, but he kept going, following that precious breeze. Behind them, the sounds of collapse were fading, either because they'd moved too far away to hear or because the mine had finished falling in. Aaron didn't know which and didn't care. All that mattered was forward motion, was following that breeze toward whatever lay ahead. The tunnel curved, climbed, narrowed further. Aaron had to turn sideways to fit through one section, pulling Claire behind him. She was barely conscious now, her weight a dead drag that he hauled by pure stubbornness and terror. And then, impossibly, he saw it. A lighter shade of darkness ahead. Not bright, but less absolute than the blackness they'd been navigating. The breeze grew stronger, fresher, carrying the scent of pine and lake water. They emerged into moonlight. The exit was small, barely more than a crack in the mountainside, hidden behind a curtain of roots and vegetation. But it was open air, it was freedom, and Aaron wanted to weep with relief. He dragged Claire through and collapsed on the other side, both of them gasping for air, covered in dust and blood and rock debris. For a long moment, Aaron just lay there, staring up at the stars visible through the forest canopy, unable to believe they'd survived.
Aaron?
Claire's voice was barely a whisper. I can't feel my legs. He sat up and looked at her in the moonlight. She was gray, her breathing shallow and rapid, her eyes unfocused. The escape through the mine had been too much. Her body was shutting down, going into shock or organ failure or both. Stay with me, Aaron said, gripping her hand. Don't you dare die on me now, not after everything. Claire smiled weakly.
I don't think I get a choice. But Aaron, thank you for not giving me to them, for choosing the hard way. Sarah would be proud of you. You don't get to talk about my wife, Aaron said, tears streaming down his face. You don't get to say goodbye. We're getting out of this, you hear me? Both of us. But even as he said it, he could see the light fading from Claire's eyes, could feel her hand going slack in his. She was leaving, slipping away, and all his desperation and determination couldn't stop it. Tell my story, Claire whispered, her voice so faint Aaron had to lean close to hear. Don't let them bury it. Promise me.
I promise, Aaron said. I swear it. Claire nodded slightly, and then her eyes closed. Her breathing continued for a few more seconds, ragged, irregular, and then stopped. Just stopped. One moment she was alive, and the next she simply wasn't. Aaron knelt there holding her hand, crying silently, this stranger who'd become a companion, who'd shown him what courage looked like even in the face of certain death. She'd survived torture and abandonment and a goddamn mine collapse, only to die here on a mountainside under the stars. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. But then, Aaron had learned long ago that the universe didn't care about fair or right. He sat with her for a moment longer, then gently closed her eyes and arranged her body as respectfully as he could. She deserved a proper burial, deserved recognition for her sacrifice, but that would have to wait. Right now, he had a daughter to find. Aaron got to his feet and looked around, trying to orient himself. The mine had twisted and turned, and he'd lost track of direction in the darkness. But the lake was downslope. He could hear the water. If he could get back to the shore, back to where he'd left Lily hiding, maybe... A sound froze him in place. An engine, close by. Too close. And then voices, speaking in Russian, coordinating a search pattern. They were still hunting. The collapsed mine hadn't satisfied them. They wanted confirmation, wanted bodies, wanted to be sure Aaron was dead. Aaron dropped into a crouch and began moving through the forest as quietly as he could, angling downslope toward where he'd left Lily. Every few seconds he had to stop and listen, tracking the searchers by their voices and flashlight beams. There were at least 3 groups, maybe more, working in a grid pattern. Professional, thorough, determined. Aaron's rifle was nearly empty. 2 rounds left, maybe 3. Not enough to fight through a coordinated search team. He needed to avoid contact entirely, needed to reach Lily without being seen, and then somehow get them both away from here. The rock formation where he'd told Lily to hide appeared through the trees, a jumble of boulders and scree, perfect for concealment. Aaron approached carefully, watching for signs of disturbance, listening for sounds that didn't belong.
Lily, he whispered. Bug, it's me. It's Daddy. Nothing. No response. Aaron's heart rate spiked, fear flooding through him. What if they'd already found her? What if she'd been taken while he was trapped in the mine? Lily, he tried again, louder. It's safe. You can come out. A small shape emerged from between 2 boulders, and then Lily was running toward him, Mr. Whiskers clutched in one hand. Aaron caught her and pulled her close, feeling her shake with silent sobs against his chest. I thought you were dead, she whispered into his shirt. I heard the mine collapse and I thought, I'm here, Aaron said fiercely. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. We're getting out of this together, you and me. Where's Claire? Aaron's throat tightened. She didn't make it, Bug. I'm sorry. Lily's sobs intensified, and Aaron held her tighter, wishing he could absorb her pain, wishing he could make any of this okay. But wishes were useless. Action was what mattered now. We need to move, he said quietly. Can you be brave a little longer? Lily nodded against his chest, then pulled back and wiped her eyes. Where are we going? Good question.
The lake route was compromised. The trails would be watched. Their truck was miles away at the cabin, probably disabled or surrounded by now. They had no weapons, no supplies, and no clear path to safety. But Tom's place was still out there, still a goal they could aim for. If they could just get there, if they could make contact, they might still survive this nightmare. "We walk," Aaron said, "through the forest, cross country. It'll take all night, but we can make it." "Together?" Lily asked. "Together," Aaron confirmed. "You and me against the world, just like always." They set off into the forest, moving as quietly as they could, two shadows among many. Behind them, the search continued, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness, voices calling coordinates, the systematic destruction of any hiding place. But the forest was vast, and Aaron knew these mountains. His father had taught him well, had shown him how to move without being seen, how to find north by the stars, how to survive when everything went wrong. Those lessons, learned in happier times, became their salvation now. They walked for hours, Aaron checking their direction by the stars visible through gaps in the canopy, avoiding the trails and logging roads where searchers would concentrate. They moved through stands of ancient cedar, across streams that ran cold and clear, around deadfalls and through thickets that tore at their clothes. Lily never complained, never asked to rest, never cried out even when she stumbled or when branches scraped her face. She just walked, her hand in Aaron's, trusting him completely even though he'd led them into hell. Dawn was breaking when they finally saw lights ahead, not flashlights or vehicle headlights, but the warm glow of house windows. Tom's property, or at least someone's house. Aaron approached cautiously, ready to run if it proved to be another trap. But as they got closer, Aaron recognized the distinctive shape of Tom's workshop, the placement of the solar panels on the roof, the old maple tree that Tom had refused to cut down despite it being dangerously close to the house. They'd made it. Aaron's legs nearly gave out with relief. He stumbled the last 100 yards and pounded on Tom's front door, not caring about noise or caution anymore. He just needed this to be over, needed to hand responsibility to someone else, needed to finally stop running. The door opened and Tom stood there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair sticking up, sleep still in his eyes. Then he saw Aaron's face, saw Lily's terrified expression, saw the blood and dirt and trauma, and his entire demeanor changed. "Jesus Christ, Aaron, get inside, now!" They stumbled into the house and Tom locked the door behind them, already reaching for his phone. "What happened? Who did this?" "No time to explain," Aaron said. "We need to contact federal authorities, FBI, Homeland Security, someone, and we need protection. Right now." Tom didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. He just nodded and started making calls, speaking with the calm authority of someone who'd led emergency rescue operations in wilderness situations. Within minutes, he'd made contact with someone in the FBI field office in Portland, someone who took him seriously when he explained they had a witness to human trafficking and multiple murders. Within an hour, a helicopter was landing on Tom's property. Federal agents emerged, professional and armed, creating a perimeter. They took Aaron's statement, listened to Lily's stammering account, and promised protection while they investigated. Within a day, the story started breaking. The cabin, the bodies, the evidence of a massive criminal operation. Claire's notes, which she'd apparently uploaded to a secure server before her capture, provided the roadmap agents needed to start unraveling the network. Arrests began. Assets were seized. The careful structure that had operated for years began to collapse. The captain vanished, slipping away before agents could reach him. Aaron knew he was still out there somewhere, a loose end that might never be tied up. The knowledge kept him awake at night, kept him checking locks and looking over his shoulder. But there were victories too. 23 trafficking victims were rescued from locations identified in Claire's research. 3 corrupt law enforcement officers were arrested. 7 businesses used as fronts were shut down. It wasn't enough. The network was too large, too distributed for all of it to fall at once. But it was something. It was justice starting to happen. The media descended on Pine Haven. Aaron became a reluctant hero, the single father who'd stood against evil. He hated it, hated the attention, hated having cameras shoved in his face and reporters asking how it felt to kill someone. But he endured it because Claire had asked him to tell her story, and this was how that story got told. 6 weeks after that terrible Sunday, Aaron and Lily stood under a Douglas fir tree in a cemetery outside Portland. Claire's grave was simple, just a headstone with her name, dates, and a quote she'd apparently wanted. She spoke truth when silence was safer. Lily placed Mr. Whiskers on the grave, a sacrifice Aaron understood without her having to explain. The stuffed rabbit had been her comfort for years, but now it would stay here, keeping watch over a woman who'd saved both their lives by refusing to give up. "Do you think she knew?" Lily asked. "That she was going to die?" "I think she knew there was a chance," Aaron said carefully. "But she kept fighting anyway. That's what makes someone brave, not the absence of fear, but the choice to do what's right, despite it." They stood in silence for a while, and Aaron thought about everything that had changed. His job at the mill was gone. Too many connections to what had happened, too much scrutiny. His house in Pine Haven felt wrong now, contaminated by association with violence. They'd need to start over somewhere, build new lives. But they were alive to do that building, and Aaron had learned something in those desperate hours running through the forest. That he was stronger than he'd thought, that courage wasn't something you were born with, but something you chose in the moments that mattered most. "Dad," Lily said, "can we go now?" Aaron nodded and took her hand, and they walked back toward Tom's truck where he waited respectfully in the distance. The sun was breaking through the clouds, painting everything in shades of gold, and Aaron felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but hope. The fragile, tentative belief that maybe, despite everything, they were going to be okay. Behind them, Mr. Whiskers sat on Claire's grave, keeping eternal vigil. And as they drove away from the cemetery, Aaron whispered a promise to the woman who'd taught him what sacrifice meant. He would tell her story. He would make sure the world knew what she'd done, what she'd died trying to expose. Her investigation notes were being published, her name becoming synonymous with courage and determination. And every time someone read about the network she'd helped dismantle, every time a victim was identified and rescued, Claire Bennett would live on. The light broke through the trees as they drove, and Aaron reached over to squeeze Lily's hand. They had survived the darkness. And in surviving, they'd found something precious, the understanding that even ordinary people, faced with extraordinary circumstances, could choose to stand and fight. That was the real victory. Not that they'd won, because the scars of what they'd endured would never fully heal, but that they'd tried. That when the moment came to choose between self-preservation and doing what was right, they'd chosen right. Sarah would have been proud. Aaron was finally starting to believe that himself.